Hello everyone from Ukraine, you're watching Channel 24. My name is Andriy Drozda and our guest today is Maryana Budzheryn. She's a senior research associate with a project on managing the atom at the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center. Maryana Budzheryn is also an author of a book, Inheriting the Bomb, the Collapse of USSR and the Nuclear Disarmament of Ukraine. Mrs. Budzheryn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, let us start from the news. This week, the Defense Secretary of the United Kingdom, Ben Wallace, and the Armed Forces Minister, James Heappey, flew to Washington, D.C. for emergency talks with the U.S. counterparts amid growing concern that Vladimir Putin could launch a nuclear strike. Considering this, what can we say about the probability or possibility of a future Russian nuclear attack? How probable or possible is that catastrophic move from the Kremlin?
Right. So when we talk about the use of nuclear weapons, we usually think of a risk, right? What is the risk of a use of nuclear weapons? And that is basically, you know, in the way we conceptualize risk, it's the probability, as you say, multiplied by consequences, right? So the risk of the nuclear weapons use is, I would say, rather high because the consequences would be drastic. Now, the possibility or the probability, sort of the chances that Mr. Putin would actually resort to this move are, you know, one would like to hope are not very high, right? But his threats should not be neglected. His threat should not be dismissed. And I think that's what the White House, but also the British government are doing. They're contemplating exactly how to handle the whole, you know, kind of the risk put together in terms of the probability of use, but also how to deal with the consequences of it, should, God forbid, this would be the resort of Mr. Putin.
Yeah, the consequences really matter, but do the Western countries already have a unanimous, determined response to a Russian nuclear attack, or are they still in the process of searching for this response?
That's a very good question. I don't have a complete answer to it. What we know from open sources is that, at least here in the United States, the government, and I suspect also the British government, as you said, there's an emergency consultations taking place right now. They're considering this response very carefully and in great detail. I assume there's probably a set of contingencies, a set of responses that are being prepared. What has been communicated in public to Mr. Putin, first and foremost, was that consequences would be catastrophic and the response would be very severe. But that's rather ambiguous, right? We really don't know the details. We know that there have been private consultations with the Kremlin, and perhaps more detailed consequences have been spelled out to Mr. Putin. From the analysis that's out there, it is clear that purely diplomatic and economic punishment would not be sufficient. I think it is clear that some form of conventional response on the part of NATO and the United States, as kind of the leading ally there, is being considered. So either against U.S. forces, Russian forces on the Ukrainian territory, so Russian military targets on what is properly Ukrainian territory. Perhaps, maybe Black Sea Fleet is game. I'm not sure at this point, but it seems very likely that the consequences that are being communicated to Kremlin go way beyond, more sanctions or more armaments to Ukraine. Now, I think the idea of communicating these consequences is first and foremost to deter Mr. Putin from using nuclear weapons, to dissuade him from going nuclear in the first place. But of course, that kind of threat has to be credible. So should he not get the message, as it were. The alliance has to be able to come through and deliver on that threat.
Got it. And what do we know about the position of other countries that possess, that own the nuclear weaponry? I mean, China, India, Pakistan, France, actually. Do they pay any attention publicly, officially, to that nuclear threats that are coming from Moscow and from Russia? Or they just keep the distance and don't react publicly on the situation?
So, if memory serves, President Macron did allude to a possible conventional response to a Russian nuclear strike in Ukraine, or even within NATO. I think what the Western alliance and Western nuclear states are trying to do is to take the nuclear element out of this game. They are very conscious about the fact that if NATO enters in any way into this conflict, and there is a conventional kind of conflagration between a conventional kinetic contact between the two forces, I mean Russia and NATO, then the risk of nuclear escalation is actually very high. And if we think of, the entire Cold War, the two sides really tried to avoid conventional clashes. Precisely, there were many proxy wars, right, when the opposing sides armed different groups or states, but there weren't really a direct conventional clash, and for a very good reason, because then the belief is, and I think it's correct, that to control an escalation afterwards would be very, very difficult. And of course, at the end of the escalation is the nuclear Armageddon. Now, other states, other nuclear possessors, I would sort of put China in a separate category because it is a near peer competitor to the United States and Russia. It is a very powerful state in the international system. They have been partners or even allies with Russia, but I think this war and Russia's basically very poor performance in this war has put the Chinese in a very difficult position where they don't want to appear like they're bailing out of the alliance with Russia, but they're certainly, I assume, they're very not happy with the way Mr. Putin has conducted this war. So they have remained sort of silent on the nuclear issues, as far as I know, and always referring to their own policy and their own nuclear posture, which is rather conservative, actually. They do have a no first use policy, the only state that does so, the only nuclear state. And they always call for others to follow their suit. India and Pakistan have been very quiet. They've been trying to stay out of this and remain neutral, as it were. They have very close economic ties and military ties. Defense, India buys a lot of armaments from Russia. So this war puts them into a very unenviable position, and they try to form this so-called axis of abstention. If we even look at the votes of the key resolutions of the UN, we see that these countries are trying to kind of sit it out. But it's becoming increasingly difficult, right? As the news of atrocities come out, Bucha, Irpin, you actually silence becomes complicity, right, in that situation. And certainly crossing the nuclear threshold in Ukraine would be also that case. It would really put them in a situation where they have to come out and say something. And we don't know if maybe they're privately communicating to Russia saying, we really won't be able to stay neutral if you do cross this nuclear threshold. So I think there is hope from generally the global South to perhaps quietly put this pressure on Russia and say, you will lose us too if you as kind of a neutral party, as an outlet for your economic activity, for your oil and gas, if you go nuclear.
Sure. Let us talk more about the global South. Russia has received thousands of kamikaze drones from Iran and now asks for more. They want to get some heavier drones and even ballistic missiles. The question is, What are the conditions of this deal? How possible is it that both sides receive mutual benefits from this deal? I mean, Russia wants more drones and more missiles, and Iran wants to have its own atomic bomb with a little help of Russia, probably. How possible would be this, or it is just a conspiracy theory?
Well, we don't know, really. It has been a speculation, right? Iran has been pursuing a nuclear program that is widely suspected to be aimed at actually acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. And there has been an international effort by the European Union, and Russia has been sort of part of it, right, for the first JCPOA, the first Iran deal signed in 2015, to try and thwart that program and contain it. Iran does have its own uranium enrichment capability. They're ramping up an enrichment to a weapons grade level of the uranium, but there certainly are very valuable things that Russia could provide should it decide to in the nuclear realm. For instance, warhead design data, testing data. You develop nuclear weapons. At some point, you need to test them. You can't test them in the open air. That's prohibited now. That hasn't been done since, I think the last test was in mid-90s. You can test them on the ground, but that requires certain facilities. So the more advanced nuclear countries they have years worth of data of nuclear testing, where perhaps they could transfer that data to an aspiring proliferator. It's actually very difficult to miniaturize a warhead. So once you've designed a nuclear device, to make it small enough and reliable enough to fit on a missile, right, and make sure that it goes off exactly when you need it, is actually a rather challenging piece of engineering. And we've seen both, taken over a decade for Pakistan to do that. It has taken a long time for North Korea to get there. We're not even sure it has gotten there yet. So there are things that Russia in the nuclear realm could certainly offer Iran should it choose to. But there's also other rather valuable things that are non-nuclear that Russia could make part of the deal. So I don't think we should automatically assume that it would be something in the nuclear realm. Both countries are now under heavy sanctions regime. They could cooperate. They're already cooperating in the way in finding ways to evade it, to not only to survive but thrive under sanctions. Right. So they could certainly cooperate. That Russia could possibly share some of its technology and have contracts for extracting Iranian oil, right? So there could be cooperation in that realm as well.
Got it. And how dangerous is the situation at the Parisian nuclear station right now? Is there any chance to get rid of Russian military forces there without nuclear disaster and other accidents?
This has been a story I've been following very closely since March, since Zaporizhzhia has been occupied. And I'm sorry to report that this is really an unprecedented and rather criminal set of actions on the part of the Russian Federation, not surprisingly, of course, for how it prosecutes this war. We actually don't have a ton of reliable third-party corroborated situation, but since there was this new spur of escalation in August where there has been shelling, bombing, fires at the station. A plan was revealed, a Rosatom plan for disconnecting this plant, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, from the Ukrainian grid and connecting it to the Russian-controlled grid, right, maybe through Crimea or otherwise. Seems to be the actions of what has been happening there, the disconnection from the power supply, seem to be consistent with that plan. So, if I were a betting woman, if I were a gambler, I know where I would put my money, my chips on which table in terms of who is the perpetrator of some of these severe breaches in nuclear safety and security. One thing there is that we have been watching kind of the disconnection and reconnection to the grid. We have been wondering about these backup generators, how much diesel fuel they have in order to produce electricity to keep the cooling systems going, prevent the core and spent fuel pools from overheating and creating a major disaster. And these are very, very important elements of the nuclear safety and security system at a nuclear power plant. But I think we have to recognize also the importance of the human factor, right? There has been 11,000 people working at Zaporizhzhia. Maybe there's less now, right? But still, it's thousands of nuclear engineers, very highly trained specialists. They're not easily replaced. And even, Russia is having a problem finding, that many people to bring to Zaporizhzhia and convincing nuclear engineers to move to a war zone to substitute the Ukrainian staff. And so this Ukrainian staff is working under terrible physical and psychological conditions. And no matter how good your safety systems are, no matter how many generators you put there, they're still operated by human beings. And these human beings are working under such duress. It is a very, very grave violation of any security procedure possible. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen that Russia is making an attempt to substitute the management, right? They've abducted the general director, they've abducted deputy director and two other senior managers. They're taking them somewhere, probably torturing, terrorizing them, and then releasing them to Ukraine, hopefully, substituting them by people loyal to Russia. So now this kind of middle management, the people who actually operate the plant, will not have allies up there in the management, and their situation is even more dire. So I think we really, as experts, as media, as international community, we really need to focus and to really communicate the plight of these people at Zaporizhzhia right now.
Got it. Let us take a brief look to the future. Ukraine wins the war. Russia is defeated and is collapsing. What should be done in this case to Russian nuclear weaponry? Is there any guarantee that this nuclear disarmament of Russia would be accomplished safely and would be successful?
So that's an interesting hypothetical, and of course that has already happened. That has happened in 1991, right, when the Soviet Union, a nuclear superpower, collapsed, and there were exactly these same concerns as to loose nukes was the term at that time, brain drain. So the flight of nuclear scientists to other places in the world to other countries that want to buy this kind of expertise. So that certainly would be, the second episode of that story. There has been the good news is that, at that time it was an unprecedented occurrence, and there were really very quick and innovative policy solutions, certainly on the U.S. side, that President Bush first and then President Clinton came up with. One of them was the non-Lugar program of technical assistance to the former Soviet Union to try and help improve security, but also disarm and dismantle these systems. But I have to say that took place in an atmosphere of cooperation, both with Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, who inherited parts of this nuclear arsenal, but also with Russia. There was a spirit of cooperation between Washington and Moscow back then, where, American experts would come in. They would even be admitted to some of these highly secured, facilities to see how to improve security systems there and so forth, to make sure there's not, somebody is not selling nuclear weapons or nuclear material out of the back door, which in the early 90s could certainly happen, if for all of us who remember what the early 90s looked like in the former Soviet realm. If this situation transpires in the antagonistic, in the adversarial context, then it would be a lot more difficult to get access and to try and ensure that there isn't a spread of these weapons, and not just nuclear weapons, all sorts of. And let's not forget, Russia has a biological weapons program still. That's quite secret. We still don't know. It was allegedly dismantled, but probably not. It has a chemical weapons program. So there's a lot of things that could be sold or disappeared if there's chaos in Russia. And I think that was, back then it was one of the concerns of the Americans. That's why they actually supported Gorbachev in trying to preserve the Soviet Union, because they were fearing this chaos and disorder and proliferation. And I wonder if that is also the concern of many Western governments today.
Mrs. Budzheryn, thank you so much for this conversation. It was a great experience for me. I'm very thankful that you have joined us for this dialogue, for this conversation, and we hope to see you soon again on our channel. You're always welcome to be on our channel, and it was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. І слава Україні!
Героям слава! And thank you, our dear audience. You were watching Channel 24. Our guest today was Maryana Budzheryn, and we hope to see you soon on our channel with our new guest.